My name's Isabel Alkoff. I'll be interviewing Ava Ray. The date is January 24th, 2024, and we are in Villanova, Pennsylvania.
Jude? Yeah. I didn't put
Good morning. Could you give me your full name and date of birth?
Eva K. Ray. I was born in March 5th of 1933.
And your maiden name, please?
Koenig.
Can you spell it?
Used to be Koenig. Konig.
Thank you. And where were you born?
I was born in Zagreb, Yugoslavia.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your home, your family in Zagreb?
My father and my mother and I lived in the home, and when my sister was born, Maya, the four of us lived in the home. We also had a full-time housekeeper that lived in the home, and we had a garden, almost like a farm. We had some animals. We grew all kinds of fruit trees and vegetables, and to do that, we had another family living on our property he was the gardener of the family and had some kids. My mother was a physician, so she wasn't home a lot during the day. And my father worked in a store, which my father owned with his parents. And so I stayed at home till I was 4 years old.
Can you tell me your mother's first name, maiden name, and what type of medicine she practiced?
Erna Koenig, and she was a pediatrician.
Okay, and your father's family was always in Zagreb, or?
My father's parents, his father was born in Hungary. His mother, I think, was born in Vienna, Austria. He was born in Vienna, Austria, but very soon, I think he might have been 2 when they moved to Zagreb.
Okay, and what language did you speak at home? What language did you speak at home?
We spoke Yugoslavian.
Okay, right. And your mother was working full-time, so you had a live-in housekeeper. And what was your relationship like with her? Was she like a nanny, or was she taking care of the house?
She was not a nanny. We called her a maid at the time. And she would do the cooking and cleaning. And a laundress would come in to do laundry once, I don't know how often. I was too little to notice.
Do you remember having friends, or did you spend most of the time at home?
I don't remember having anybody except a cousin like the first 4 years, but after 3 years, I had a surprise package, which was my sister.
And her name, please?
And her name is Maya, and I thought that the way I was introduced to it is I pictured somebody coming home with whom I can play. That was a big disappointment because I couldn't play with her at the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you started school at what age?
Well, at age 4, I went to preschool, and happened to be Montessori preschool in Zagreb, and it was on the other side of this huge square, huge square. And I got there, initially my mother took me, but I was 4 years old, and after a while, she told me I could go by myself. But of course, I don't know how she did it, but she followed me to make sure. She did that a few times. And after that, I just went to school by myself. It was like a 20-minute, 30-minute trolley ride. Mm-hmm. And then I had to cross the square and go up to the nursery, or no, the preschool.
Do you remember anything that happened in that classroom?
I really do not remember, except that it was a German-speaking preschool, and so that within a year I learned to speak German. And kids pick things up very quickly, so I spoke fluent German in a year. And the next year I went to the same school when I was 5, and got there by myself also. And it was a French school. I mean, it was a French-speaking class. And I learned how to speak French in the same way.
And did you make friends there? Do you remember any of the kids at
I
all?
do not
Yes.
remember anything about the preschool. No.
Right. And after you went to preschool, you returned home every day, and who was there? Just the housekeeper? Were there other relatives nearby?
They were not nearby, but my whole family, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, everybody lived in Zagreb. There was nobody anywhere else. But I didn't see, except for my cousin whom I used to play with, one of my cousins. And another cousin too. I played with some relatives, but I do not remember any friends. And at home, Maya and I were alone, and this lady was there. Mm-hmm. And the gardeners were on the property.
Okay, all right. That brings us to when you were turning 6. Where did you go to school then?
I went to it was a Catholic country, so it was a Catholic school, mm-hmm. but it was a public school. That's what we call public school here. And I attended that. There were, I mean, the thing I remember almost most clearly, which is sort of weird, is that every Tuesday and Thursday, a priest would come, and they would have, I think they call it catechism or something of that nature, and there was always a picture of Christ on the front above the blackboard, mm-hmm. with the blood running. I mean, to me, it was gruesome and frightening and awful. And he used to say, we were 2 Jewish girls in the class. She was a friend of mine later on, but not so, I didn't see her after school. He used to come in and say the Jews killed Christ and tell the story. And all the kids would look at us, because in Yugoslavia, when you met somebody, you'd say, my name is Eva, or Eva at the time, and you'd say, well, what religion are you? That was part of the introduction to somebody, or what age you would say here, or mm-hmm. what school do you go to. But there they said, so everybody knew we were Jewish. And my mother got permission after she found out what was going on. And I don't know how long that took, a few months. And she got permission for us to go to Hebrew school at that time. So we would leave when the priest came, and we'd go to, I don't know how the timing worked, but whatever, she arranged it. So we'd go to the synagogue and go to Hebrew school. So we didn't have to sit through something unpleasant.
Do you remember how observant your family was at the time when you were little?
Yes, we would observe the high holidays. And I don't remember going to synagogue except for this experience with Hebrew school, where we would always we would have the seders at my uncle's house or at our house or at somebody's relative's house. And Rosh Hashanah, we'd go to synagogue. I don't remember anything else very religious.
Okay. So did your mother cook at all, or were all meals, even holiday meals, made by the housekeeper?
I have no idea how we had the holiday meals. Maybe we never had them at our house. Might have been at my grandparents' house, because I don't remember her cooking. My mother didn't cook. She told the housekeeper what to make and how to make it. My mother her cooking was not very expert, so she didn't do much cooking. And I did much of the cooking later on in life, so. Okay. But she knew how to cook, of course. She could make meals, but not that I remember in those days.
Did your sister go to the same elementary school, public school that you did?
My sister went to the nursery school, and the war broke out when she was 4 years old. So she did not go to school after that.
Okay, and you say the war broke out. Can you describe how you, as a child, knew that the war was breaking out, or describe what you knew?
Well, there were several things that happened. we knew there was a war going on. Generally, I guess we heard people talking. I didn't read about it, and my mother had to put blue, like a masking tape type of thing on the windows, maybe because if there were bombs, I guess it would protect us. Apparently she started like packing little packages, and the only reason that I knew the war started is because first they had trial air raids, and we had to go in our cellar. And then we started hearing bombs, and we heard a lot of crashes, and it was the war. And every time there was a siren that went on, and we had to go in the basement. We called it the cellar, and play there till they had what do they call it? When they had another alarm to show that it was finished. All clear alarm. That's right. And
did you know
so
who was attacking? Who was
we
sending
knew
the
that
bombs?
the Germans were attacking in a very general sense. I mean, I had no idea who the Germans were, except I spoke German, and my family spoke German. My father's side, they spoke German. My mother's side was only Croatian. So then this went on for 10 days. And my mother would leave the house and leave us a lot of the time, not all the time, because people got bombed, kids got hurt. She was a pediatrician, and she started not only handling kids, but anybody who got hurt. You know, she was a physician, trained in Zagreb, and then specialized in Vienna. Actually, she studied with Freud, which was sort of exciting for me when I found out later. And then one day, she went out, and we started hearing, after 10 days, there was bombing, and it suddenly stopped. And I don't know how much later, we heard people screaming. Our house was maybe a 3-minute walk from the road to the house, because we had all these birds, and my grandfather collected exotic birds. So we had all these bird cages on the way to the house. People used to call it the zoo. I thought they were talking about me, but they weren't. So anyway, we heard this noise on the street. People were screaming. And Maya and I ran out to the street, and we see all these soldiers, tanks, guns, people walking down the street. And half the people were saying Heil Hitler, you know, doing the Heil Hitler. I think they did it with the right hand, but I'm not sure. And half the people, some were crying, some were cheering. It was a very mixed bag, and we didn't know what to think and what it was. We had no idea. So we ran back to the house. My mother said not to go out there. Do not go to the street. Do not do anything. Just stay in the house. And it was the surrender after 10 days of Yugoslavia. And the people that walked in, and I was a little confused about that, I think it was the Italians that came in. And the people that followed them were the Ustashi, which was the Nazis, the Yugoslavian Nazis, who had not escaped, but they went to Italy to be trained. So those guys were trained by the Italians. And I mean, I found that out when I grew up, but to us, it was just a mixed bag, because it was screaming, yelling. My mother was not happy, and we didn't know how to interpret it at all until things started happening, which was days later.
And your father was home also?
Well, that's a long story.
Yeah.
You want me to tell my father's story?
Yes.
All right. In 1928, my father wanted to get out of Yugoslavia and applied for an American visa because he wanted to study engineering or get maybe a graduate degree, because he was an engineer by training. He was a civil engineer. He wanted to go to the United States and couldn't get a visa. And then in 1933, Hitler came into power on my birthday, actually, and he read the book that Hitler wrote, which is Mein Kampf. Well, in Mein Kampf, Hitler said exactly what he was planning to do: get rid of all the undesirables, Jews, gypsies, whoever. I don't think he described concentration camps at that point yet. But anyway, my father read that and he says, we're getting out of here. So then he applied for a visa again, made sure that maybe he could get it. By 1998, his visa came through. So he said, I'm going to the United States. He had worked in my grandparents' store, which was a leather goods and toy store, and they made a lot of the stuff on the properties. That was a nice memory of mine, which I can talk about later. But he went to England to buy some leather goods, some business, and was coming to the United States, had a ship already, and was coming to get a job and an apartment for us. And then we were going to follow as soon as he secured what he needed. And in London, he got appendicitis, and they called my mother. She flew, 1939. She took an airplane and flew to London. People were not, I don't know how she ever got on the plane, and came there, talked to my father, and he said, I'm feeling a little better. I'll be much better tomorrow. And unfortunately, the next day he died. So we did not have a visa because we were coming through him. Mm-hmm. And in those days, the families could come to the United States if the father or mother were there. Mm-hmm. Just they could come. They didn't need their own visas. So now we didn't have a visa anymore. My father was dead. So this is what happened to my father. And until after the surrender, then all these things happened to us in Zagreb.
Okay, so now your mother was alone with 2 children, and the Nazis have occupied the city, and your father has passed. Did you feel the tension? How did you have a reaction? How much did you know about what was going on around you?
Well, I knew very well, because the week after they surrendered, some men in uniform came to our house, and they told my mother we have to get out, and we should leave only enough for 2 people to live there. 4 dishes and some pots and pans or whatever it takes. I didn't know what we were doing, mm-hmm. except that we were packing and leaving. So we packed our things. Maya took what she wanted, and I took what I wanted. We went to my aunt's apartment in Zagreb. My aunt and uncle lived there, and then another family came there also in this little tiny apartment. And obviously the people took over the house. The people, I'm not sure if they were Italians or Ustashi. I think they were an Italian army group. But anyway, they came to the house. The Germans were all over the place also. So we stayed in this house, and about a few days later, they came back to the apartment. I mean, not the house. Came back to my mother, and she said, what do you want? And they said, we want all your clothing, your winter clothing, you put it away. You hid them. We want your pictures. We want your music. We want your books. My mother said, you said I could take everything. If you don't get it, anyway, they threatened her with killing her and so on and so forth. Turns out that the gardener knew where we were hiding things, because he helped, I guess, pack and take it away. And he was a turncoat, so he told them where we hid things. On the other hand, our maid worked to keep us keep everything quiet. She would not give them any information. So you never know how people are going to react, when something happens. Well, he told the Germans or the occupiers about where we had. And so they came back once. And then they came back a second time. And I remember this so well because I was standing there listening to this. And they asked for various things, your silver, I don't know what they asked for. Whatever they wanted, they asked for, and they threatened to kill her if she didn't give it to them. I think the second time they said they're going to hang her or something like that. And so she gave up everything. And so I knew that things were not as they should be. Now, in the meantime, my mother went to the consulate every day and sat at the consulate waiting, because as soon as my father died, she applied for a visa. And then she went to the consulate every day to see if we can get a visa, to rush them. Now, she did have some contacts, and one of our distant family worked there. Olga Debona was her name, and Mary Vucetic was also there, who later worked at the UN, but both of them were pushing for us. And they were both in the American consulate, yes. And they were both, I don't know if they were American citizens or, Olga Debona, I think, was an American citizen for some, maybe, or one of them was.
Sometimes
but they were working in
contractors from local.
Yeah, it might have been local. I don't remember, but I know one of them was a relative, so she might have been local. But I know Mary Vucetic had lived in the United States, and they were working for them. And so every day she would go there. And after maybe, and then at home in the apartment, they would start coming for my uncle, and they would take him away, and my aunt screamed, you can't take him, you can't take him. And then there was a couple of other men that were there, maybe visiting, and I remember they took uncles. They took them away. So they
Do you
took
know
the
where
men.
they were taken?
I don't know now or ever, but I make assumptions. There was a concentration camp called Jasenovich. I have it written down in the other room. There was a concentration camp not far from 60 miles, or maybe kilometers, 60 miles from Zagreb. And my assumption is they went there first. Eventually, I'm sure they took them to the camps in the German camps, because two of my uncles I know went there.
Now, did you hear from them? Did you receive letters? Did they come home on weekends and things like that?
Nothing.
Okay.
They left.
All right.
I never saw them again.
Never came back.
But we weren't there. We were in Zagreb only for another 2 months. Because after 2 months, my mother was sitting in the consulate, and they were saying, we're moving out. The consular people. We're leaving because the Germans are taking over the consulate, and they're coming in, and we have to go. As that was happening, and they were packing, her visa came through. And the Germans were coming in to settle, to bring all their stuff there. And this is the story I heard, is that the consular people said, Erna, out the back door, just get out of here. She walks out with a visa.
Now, what year was that?
And that was, the war started in April. That was April of 1941. Okay? That's when they surrendered.
Okay. And you had mentioned earlier something you wanted to go back to about the leather and toy business.
Oh, that was just my memory of my time there, because Christmas time, we had a very fancy store. There was all handmade leather goods, like Dunhill used to be in the United States. And the toy store was like FAO Schwartz was here. I remember those because they were like the Croatian ones, the Zagreb ones. And so the king of Yugoslavia, King Peter, would come every Christmas to buy presents to our store. And I was a little girl, like I was probably cute, 6 years old, and it was 2 floors, so people used to buy things on the second floor, and somebody had to take them to the cashier in front, and I would carry things for the king out to the front. And one day the king said to me, "What can I give you? What can I buy for you?" My mother would not let us get gifts ever, except for birthdays, Hanukkah, occasions. But we were not just allowed to get gifts. So I told him that. I told the king I can't get any gifts. And I mean, he was a teenager at the time. I don't know whether he was 18 or I can't remember. I didn't look it up. But anyway, he was a teenager, and so I had so much fun during Christmas time, helping in the store. I helped at other times too. So my father he was an engineer first, but he had taken over the store. So I was there a lot. My grandparents were there a lot.
All right. So your mom now has a visa in her hand to go to the United States. What happened then?
The people at the consulate told her, "You come with us, we will protect you, and we'll take you from here all the way to the United States." They went through Germany. I don't know why. And in Germany, they said, "We cannot protect you anymore." I don't know why, but they left us in Germany.
Where in Germany can you?
We landed in Frankfurt am Main. And so we were in a hotel, and there were bombs every day. Every night we'd go to the cellar. Every day my mother would go to the police, I don't know, the embassy, I don't know where she went. You have to remember, Yugoslavia had surrendered, so they were not enemy. It's not an enemy country anymore. America was not in war yet, so we were not enemies. And so she tried to get a visa there, and our passport didn't say we're Jewish because passports didn't say that at the time. I mean, in Zagreb we had to wear a Jewish star, but they didn't say we were Jewish. So I guess her lawyers or somebody said that we should go to Berlin. She should go to Berlin to secure a visa. Now, we went to Berlin, but because we came with the embassy, we did not have an exit visa. You had to have an entrance visa and an exit visa in every town that you went to. And when you came to a town, you reported to the police that you're there. That's the way it worked. And we stayed in a hotel in Berlin, and my grandparents or somebody had an apartment they were renting in Berlin. And so that's my mother was drawing money from that somehow. And so we were able to stay there. And we used to we had one aunt in Berlin at that point. And she had rations like 1 egg, I remember so distinctly, 1 bottle of milk and 1 egg a month. So we had our own rations, which were normal rations. As I said, we were not enemies. And so we would buy food and take it to her house. And my mother told us never to talk to anybody, nobody. So, and we were very good, we were very obedient, always. I still am. It just doesn't go away. Anyway, so we went to my aunt's a lot. She went every day to a lawyer, or she had meetings every day, I don't know with whom, for what. And one day, her lawyer, who apparently was really high up in the ranks, in the German government ranks, and was liked by the people, I have this memory that he was Jewish, but I don't know whether that's true or not. He was definitely helping Jews. But, so he told her, I think he told her, go speak to this guy, his name is Himmler. I can't remember his first name. Heinrich Himmler, right. Mm-hmm. And my mother went there, and of course she didn't know who he was. He was just a person she went to talk to. And when she walked in, he said, So what do you want to do? Why do you want to go? Blah, blah. She said, well, we're Jewish and we want to get to the United States. So somehow it came out that we were Jewish. And he started yelling at her and screaming, why aren't you wearing the Jewish star, the German Jewish star? And my mother was so smart. She said, we had a star, and it said Z with a line through it. That stands for J. Because in Croatian, it's Židov, is Jewish. Mm-hmm. And so she said, but here nobody would understand what it was about. So I decided not to wear it. Because they told her not to tell anybody she was Jewish until she went to this office. Mm-hmm. And her lawyer in Berlin said, tell them you're Jewish. Because they were sending Jews, they were doing, I don't know why. Well, you'll see in a minute. So Himmler, he's yelling at her, and she explains that, and he says, okay, go. So she goes back to her lawyer's office, and she hears her lawyer say to Himmler, you know what, Heinrich, or whatever his name is, let her get out of the country. She's just going to give us trouble. We don't need that. We don't want that. Just send her out. And that's how we got our visa. So when we went out, the thing that was so interesting, we went out on a closed train. I mean, now I know there were closed trains going to concentration camps. I'm sure they didn't. Maybe they did think of it. I didn't. I was a kid.
By
I was
closed
8.
train, do you mean like a cattle car?
No. A very nice overnight. We closed meaning nobody can come in and out.
Okay.
That's what I mean by closed.
No, it didn't stop anywhere.
Yes,
Right.
we stopped in Paris, and I remember that was one of the happy memories on our trip. I remember all the good stuff, really only. And the French, we didn't have much food with us, and I think it took 4 days for some reason, I don't know why, to go to Spain. And they brought us bread and cheese, and they brought us all kinds of goodies on the trains, the French people, So I had a very good feeling about that. And we finally ended up in Spain.
Do you know where you landed in Spain?
In Barcelona.
Okay.
We came at 2 a.m.
Okay. And it was just your mother and your sister and yourself?
The train was filled with German professionals. They were lawyers, doctors, engineers, well-to-do people. Maybe they paid. I don't know how that happened. They were sending all these people out to safety, I guess, or to getting out.
Did you identify any of them as being Jewish?
They were all Jewish.
Okay.
It was a train of Jewish professionals. And don't ask me how, why. No idea. But anyway, my mother was very friendly, and has made friends with people on the train. And we get to Barcelona at 2 a.m, and we had a visa, an American visa, the one we got in Croatia, in Yugoslavia, which expired on the Sunday. So my mother couldn't go to the police. It's closed on Sundays. And so she went to the police station on Monday to report in that we're there. And the police, because she didn't have a visa, they put her in prison. Oh, I remember just one important thing is on the way to Barcelona, we stopped in San Sebastian. And in San Sebastian, everybody got out of the train and started yelling and screaming, we're free, we're free, because Spain was neutral. And everybody thought this was it, we were free. And so, it was a beautiful place. I can picture it today. And so then, when she got to Spain, they caught her on Monday and put her in jail, in prison. And she was disgusted because she was with all these prostitutes and all these criminals, and they're sitting on a bench. I mean, the way she described it was horrendous. And in Spain, there was no due process, so she thought she'd be stuck there. She had no idea, years or what. Well, one of the people on our train who she befriended was an attorney, and so he called up her attorney in Germany. Now, how he knew? I guess he knew the story or how it was, and he somehow arranged for her to be released. And so she came back to the hotel. Maya and I stayed alone in the hotel at the time for about, I don't know how long, but seemed very long, but I have no idea how long it was.
Did you have food?
Oh, they were so nice to us. They gave us a party. They told us my mother went to San Sebastian because she had paperwork to do. She had meetings. And we knew it was so beautiful and she was so happy there that we didn't worry. Mm-hmm. So they kept us from worrying. People were really nice. And the hotel owner was really nice. They gave us food. We were well taken care of. So then she came back from prison and I guess told us the truth because, you can't lie to kids. So anyway, we stayed in Barcelona for a little while until we went to Lisbon by train. And in Lisbon, my mother had already paid for a ship to go to the United States. But number one, the first ship we missed it because of all the time that it took to get there. And there was a second ship. Hayes did not tell her that it was leaving, and so we missed it. Something happened, I don't know what. She was furious. She paid for one, she paid for another. And it was a joint distribution committee that helped her in Germany and all these other places. They got involved somehow.
Yeah.
Because I used to hear that. And then the third ship, we were in Portugal maybe 2 months waiting for a ship. Mm-hmm. It wasn't 2 months. No. April, maybe 1 month. I was little. Everything seemed very long to me. And so finally we got the third ship. It was called the Guinée. It was a freighter for 80 people. There were 570 people on it. At least I found that number out just recently from the manifest. My daughter found the manifest in Ellis Island and had it framed and gave it to me. And so my mother was in second class, and we were in second class in a small little room that had 3 beds, a double bed and a couch, not 3 beds, a double bed and a couch, a bunk bed, and a couch. I slept on top because I was the old one. Maya slept on the bottom, and my mother slept on. Oh no! There was the other lady. So it was 2 bunk beds, and I don't know. My mother must have slept on top. I don't remember that. So the other lady got very, very I remember that. She got very seasick and took pills and some kind of fluid that made us so sick because it smelled so bad. Anyway, everybody was very seasick, and my mother being a pediatrician, everybody was really sick, and there was no food, and there were people in steerage. They threw away some of the luggage they wouldn't let on the ship, and they put people everywhere in the hallways. They slept everywhere. They would not let my mother out of second class. They wouldn't let them cross to first class or to third. I think there was a third and fourth class and steerage. Anyway, so that ship took 1 day out, and the ship stopped. And we didn't know why. Nobody knew why. They went back to Lisbon. Well, everybody... Oh, I know why. I'm sorry. The war broke out on December 7th. America came into war. When it turned back, everybody thought we couldn't go because the war broke out here, December 7th. So we went back to Lisbon, and people were completely demoralized. Some awful things happened, which I don't even want to talk about, but people committed suicide. Bad things happened. And we went all the way back to Lisbon, and it turns out that they needed to know where the mines were, which the Germans laid. so that we could circumvent the mines. And we went to Lisbon, and then we got on the ship and went out again. And it took 4 weeks instead of 1 week. So of course we ran out of food. People were sick. We weren't. I think we were sick the first day, Maya and I. That's about it. But we played. We met other little kids, and we played. And, you know, we were miserable because we were hungry. And they ran out of water. I think we must have had tea with salt water. I don't know what they did. But it was horrible. We had fish every single meal. I can't look at fish anymore. Still. Now, I don't care for fish, except some. Sushi's all right. But anyway, I think that anyway, we ate on the ship. It was cold. It was winter. It was December. It was horrible on the ship, even though my sister and I always found kids to play with, and we adapted. It's amazing kids adapt to whatever is. People don't think they do, but they do. And one day in the morning, we looked out, and guess what was in front of us? The Statue of Liberty. I mean, it makes me want to cry because it was unbelievable, unbelievable. The moment we saw it, and we were in America, so.
Do you know your arrival date?
Yes, January 14th in 1942.
Okay. Was anyone waiting at the harbor for you?
Yes. For one thing, we had people who, what's it called? They gave affidavits for us.
Yes.
So this was a friend of my father's, Fred Fail. He was a photographer in New York. And an aunt was there. And maybe like 3-4 people. And it took us 2 days to get off the ship, or maybe 1 day only to get off the ship and to go through all the processing, medical exams and all kinds of things. And so we had to wait, and then we finally were taken to a hotel in Manhattan, and they brought us milk, which we hadn't had. I mean, I think we both lost like half our weight coming over, and sandwiches and things like that. And so we had our first meal in the hotel, and we were in Manhattan at that point.
Do you remember if your mother had any money left?
Well, as I said, my father was very proactive. He knew we wanted to get out. And when he found out in 1939 that he got his visa, he sent a gold brick to the United States. So that's what Mom used when we got here. Now, how much it was worth, I have no idea. I know she worked. She had to work. But I think that was the source of her money in the beginning.
So when you arrived, you went to the hotel, and then where did you go from there?
My aunt had a house with her husband and two adopted kids. She had a house in Orange, New Jersey. And we went there for a few days, and then my mother was looking for an apartment, and she found an apartment. And here's the coincidences in the world. I mean, the coincidences, I've skipped over many, but here's one. She went in, there was a landlady, and the landlady, Mrs. Laval, and the landlady said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "I'm from Zagreb." She said, "So am I." When they started talking, they realized that she had been in school with my grandmother, a landlady on 75th Street between Madison and Park in New York. So that was very nice for my mom. So my mother rented furnished apartments, and that's where we stayed. I think they might have been one room, maybe one bedroom. And she did that for 4 years, except every summer she would take all our stuff, put it in storage, and the next time when we came back, because she wanted us out of New York in the summer because it was so hot. It was horrible. Before air conditioning, so it was hot. So we would move every single summer, come back, get another furnished apartment. But the school I went to, the first school, was PS 166 on 88th Street in New York. And they put me in a C class. They called it a C class. I don't know what that stood for. I have no idea. It was a class for foreigners. I guess they thought that was a way to teach them English. Well, we spent 3/4 of the year speaking French, German, any language that people could communicate in. And everybody spoke German or French or something. So we never learned any English. So the next year, she took us out, and we moved to another place, and we went to a different school, PS 87. And there they put me in 3rd grade. Well, I think I was supposed to be in 4th grade. But they put me like in 2nd, 3rd. It was combined. Or they pushed me through. And there I learned you had to speak English. I mean, everybody spoke English, and kids learn very, very quickly. And so I was looking at a diary that I kept in all those years. And the funny part is my daughter actually found the page that says, "Dear Diary, I'm going to be writing to you today, but I will write in English." And that's dated 1941. No. 1943. 1 year I was here, and I wrote a diary from then on in English, which is, kids learn fast. My mother came to school, and the teacher talked to her, and she said, what, maybe we were here maybe a year and a half by that time. She said, "Where are you from?" She says, "I'm from Yugoslavia." And she said, "But your kids were born here." So that's what happens. So that was what happened when we got to New York.
Okay, and how many family members did you have here? Were there any?
We had my father, as I told you, try to get out of Yugoslavia. But his sister and her husband and 2 boys, the year before, were able to leave. So
Can you tell me their names?
their name is Alice, Vita, and Paul, Vita. The 2 boys were Peter and Tommy. And they moved to Los Angeles. My uncle was an OBGYN doctor. So they did very well in Los Angeles. And so they were here, but we didn't talk to them. They were in Los Angeles, so we had no contact. In New York, we had a lot of people whose maybe parents or grandparents were cousins. So they were like 3rd cousins removed, or, distant people. But when you we lost everybody. I'll tell you how we found that out. But, you get close to whatever family's left. So we were very close to them. My Aunt Tante Mitzi only spoke German, and so we renewed our German, and she took care of us. When my mother studied all the time for her medical exams. She had to take all the medical exams like medical students do to get her licensing, and that took 2 years. Oh, she had to learn English first. And she had us to support, so she worked for the UN, and she learned English, and she had to take her exams. So, difficult life.
What did she do for the UN?
Translation.
Okay.
Was it the UN then?
No, it was after the war became.
Yeah, it was United Nations. It was, I don't remember the name
predecessor.
of it. Yeah, it was one of those things.
Can you tell me, we touched very quickly on family members that were lost in Europe. Can you tell me any names?
Yeah, so as I told you, we moved every summer to get us out of New York. The first summer we went to South Carolina to see some family. Actually, the husband was my godfather. They had a red pepper farm, and they brought red pepper to the United States. Paprika, sorry, not red pepper, paprika to the United States. So we stayed there for a month, and the next year we went to we started going to camp. And I don't know which year we were at camp when, in August, the war, VE Day. No, wait a minute. What? VJ Day was in New York? Yes. VE Day was before VJ Day. So, victory in Europe in August in camp. Then we went back to New York and went to other camp. And then when VJ Day came about, which was not long, I don't know how long after that, 5 months, I think. Yeah. After that, my mother got a telegram from an uncle in Zagreb, Uncle Dragutin in Zagreb. And the telegram in one, or maybe it was a letter, in one swoop gave her all the information about the family. Everybody that they mentioned died, was killed in a concentration camp. No, they didn't say it was killed in a concentration camp. They said they died of typhus. That's how they used to talk about their death. Everybody died of typhus. Her mother, her two in-laws, her three sisters, brother, everybody else too. And their families. One sister survived and tried to come to the United States later on. Her husband had escaped from a prison of war camp, and then they were in a concentration camp, and at some point, and they, I guess, escaped, or anyway, they got out of those camps. And my mother was able to bring them to where they would take them. And the only place she could find is Venezuela. So they went to Caracas, and that's where my cousins, they had one boy, first cousin, so he lived in Caracas. And that's the only sister who survived. Her brother and his wife were in a concentration camp. She got pregnant, or she was pregnant, and had a child. Her name was Renata, had a baby. Renata...
Let me clarify, she had the baby in the camp?
She had the baby in the camp, is what I heard. Mm-hmm. They had best friends, the Fürsts, and the best friends, they snuck her out some way, the baby. And they took the baby and adopted Renata. The parents were killed in the concentration camps. So Renata lived with his family in Zagreb until she went to Israel later on and married. So, well, that was another long story. But I don't know what else to tell you.
Right, so you've arrived in America, your mother passes her exams, and you're going to school. Tell me about your school life.
Okay. My school life was okay on the west side at PS 87, but then my mother passed her exam and we moved to 86th Street between Madison and Park, which was sort of a upscale kind of place, although our place was not upscale. What she did was she bought an office, all medical equipment from a doctor. And it was our apartment and office on the first floor of an pre-war apartment house. So she started her office there, and we had our apartment in the same place. We had one bathroom for the patients and for us. The living room turned into a waiting room during the day. And she stayed there till she died in 98, at 98. But that's where we lived. Maya and I had our own bedroom next to the kitchen. And when we moved there, I went to PS6, which was one of the best public schools in New York, in Manhattan or New York. And I was treated terribly. I used to come home crying every day because we couldn't afford clothing. I was wearing high shoes. Today, everybody wears high shoes. But it was, like hiking shoes. Nobody wore hiking. They all wore these, what do they call them?
Like
Can't remember. They were white and brown.
Oxfords.
Yeah, they wore different clothes. And then I wore hand-me-downs. I don't really know, but they really made fun of us. Me. I mean, they were cruel. That's sixth grade. And I was put into sixth grade, which was, I forgot what they called it, but they had one honors grade, where the kids were brighter or something. So they put me into that. So I guess by that time I was okay. But the kids were horrible to me. And it wasn't anti-Semitism. New York was filled with Jews. So it was just that I was different. Until one day, 3 girls got together. They were going to do their I don't know, Girl Scout duty or something, and they invited me to join them, to play with them in the afternoon. It was sixth grade. And I went, and they found out that I was just a regular person, and they liked me. So after that, they had in-groups and out-groups. I'd been in the out-group. So then I became one of their friends. So then after that, things were okay. By that time, we were almost in 7th grade.
How was your mother's English?
My mother she spoke very well, had a very heavy accent. And the only thing that I think she never really learned is the idioms. Like, she never understood jokes, but maybe that was just her lack of sense of humor. No, she had a great sense of humor, that's right. But no, her English was perfect because, she was a doctor and she learned English. She had to learn Spanish when she was in 86th Street because everybody was from Puerto Rico. She had rights at Mount Sinai. She had to give a day a week to work at Mount Sinai in the department. I have a picture of that, her with all the doctors. And so she, spoke English all the time. And Spanish if they happened to be Puerto Rican, and there were many then in that area, in Harlem. So, but my mother was, she was a very upbeat person. When we were in Berlin, for instance, we'd go to the cellar every night, almost, because bombs were falling. It was before America was in the war. So the English were bombing Berlin. And every morning we'd get up and there'd be some other building that's not there. And we were right next to the zoo. So one day we went to the zoo. The next day we woke up and it was not there anymore. And my mother would whisper to us, "Don't talk to anybody here, but we're very happy that they're bombing. This is good for us." And she kept telling us how good things were. And she'd keep us playing games and knitting. And, she was just always so upbeat to us. I'm sure she was pretty sad and depressed, I don't know. But she made things very pleasant, even under those sort of circumstances. So when she came to the United States, she adapted very, very quickly. And was really loved by most people. She never was bitter, even with all the news about her family. I never understood it. She just didn't think about it.
Okay. And did you make friends? Did you have girlfriends? Did you go to the movies?
I didn't go to the movies. No, I went to the movies once when I was. Every weekend, my sister and I went. The first 4 years we were there, when my mother was studying, and we went. Maya and I got on a subway down to the Battery, took a ferry over to New Jersey, took a bus when we got to the ferry to go to my aunt's for the weekend, so that my mother could work and study. And so I didn't make any friends then. I was just too busy working. After this incident with these girlfriends who decided that they liked me, that I was okay, so I became popular and eventually ended up having very good friends. We had a group of friends, one of whom I'm still in touch with every 5 years, though. And Then I went to Bronx High School of Science. And
How did you make that choice?
I wanted to be a doctor, physician. So I went there, and science was much easier for me, than history, which I didn't know what was about, or English. I mean, any other subject. Science came very naturally to me. I liked it. I was good in math. And so I wanted to be a doctor. And there were only three good schools in New York. So Stuyvesant was a boys' school. My eventual husband went there. Hunter was a girls' school. I didn't want just a girls' school. So Bronx Science seemed like the logical place.
How many girls were in your class? Let's say.
Oh my God. It was the fourth class of girls. And at that time, they asked me to run for office. There'd never been a girl running for office there. And I did run for office, despite how nervous and scared I was. I mean, it was really hard for me. But there was a young man who said, well, he'll help me. And he did. And I became secretary of the student body in the school. Mm-hmm. So by that point, I was really in good shape. You know, I was happy and worked hard. I only worked hard because I needed to I was used to it. I had to take care of my sister from the time we came to America till I went to, till I went to college probably. When we first came, she had to go with me every minute. She could not be alone. So so I made a deal with her that she should go with my friends twice and I'll go with her friends once, because my friends are so much more interesting at that age. So she did that. She had to do it. And then she would go home. This is so funny. I think she told this story, but she would go home from kindergarten, and I went back to school. We went home for lunch and then went back to school for the afternoon session. She'd go home, and there was only a morning session. Mm-hmm. She had to lie on my mother's bed till I came home at 3. And she did. She could take a doll with her or, whatever she wanted, but she had to stay on the bed, except to go to the bathroom. But she did that, and I came home, and then my mother would, I suppose, prepare some food and make dinner, and my mother wouldn't come back till late at night. So I really took care of everything from then on. And I was, I think, 8, 9. So anyway, my sister and I didn't have many friends, but I had many more than she did because we went with them.
Okay. Then graduated from high school?
I graduated from high school, went to Cornell for college. When I was a freshman in high school, I met a guy through a long story. My mother was a doctor at Mount Sinai, and his mother was a pediatrician at Mount Sinai too. And so I used to go square dancing, and I met him there. I mean, like a parallel thing. His mother passed away, and so then his name was Eddie Ray. That's still my last name. And he went to Cornell 2 years before me. I went to Cornell, partially because it was a very good school, and a big part was because he was there. After the freshman year, we got married, my freshman year. And he stayed on to get a master's so I could finish. And I graduated. And instead of graduating, in the graduation, I had a baby. So Jude was born this June. Instead of my graduating, my mother said, "Come home, you're expecting in 2 weeks. I had to drive home." So anyway, then after Cornell, I had Jude. And then my husband had to go in the Air Force because he was ROTC. So we went to Wright-Patterson, Ohio, for 2 years. And while we were there, I had twins. So the twins, Jude was 21 months old when I had the twins. And then we moved to Cleveland because he got a job in Cleveland after the Air Force. And I had another child. So within 4 years, within 3 years, I had 4 children.
And a college degree.
And the college degree. And so then we were in Cleveland. I went to Western Reserve, it was called at the time. Now it's Case Western. But I went just at night. I took one course at night. And he would stay home with the kids when I went to the course. And then we moved. He was called by GE to solve some problems that he was sort of an expert in, and we moved here to Villanova in this house. And then I wanted to find a Jewish preschool, and there were no Jews around here, no Democrats around here, nobody younger than like 30, or I don't know. I was 27 when I moved here, and I had 4 kids, and I had to drive them. Then I had to drive every day to preschool because I wanted her to have a Jewish education, because I didn't know enough to give it to her. My sister went to Hebrew school, but we couldn't afford for me to go. They wouldn't let us go in those days. It was just terrible. And I had one course for my confirmation that was with Rabbi Milton Steinberg. You may not know who he is, but he was a very famous rabbi. And it was a seminar course at his house. And to this, it's the only formal Jewish education, except courses I might have taken later. But I almost remember everything about that course. It was such a marvelous, marvelous experience. Anyway, so the kids started elementary school. Jeannie started preschool. No, Jude was in 1st grade, sorry. Because we were in Atlantic City waiting to find a house here, and she started 1st grade in Atlantic City, in Ventnor. And then we moved here. She was in 1st grade, and the twins and Jean went to the preschool at the synagogue. And I drove them every day and so on. And then when Jean was 3, I went back to school because I wanted to get, at that point I had done so much research at Cornell. I was an honor student, and they told me I was so bright, and it was research was the thing to do and not medicine, blah, blah, blah. So I got talked out of medicine pretty much well, and I decided to get a PhD. And so that's what I did then at Bryn Mawr College, which is about 3 miles from here. But the reason I went there is because the guru in the field I wanted to go into was there. So I was going to work with her, and I ended up not. So.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay, thank you.
School, yeah.
Yes, you attended graduate school.
I did.
You had 4 children. And your husband was here and going to work. It sounds like your typical American life. Did you feel like a typical American?
This was completely atypical for my era.
Yeah.
There were no mothers around here who worked. They used to tell my kids that I was a bad mother, because I might have been much less of a helicopter mother, but I think I was a good mother because I loved my kids. And we spent every summer, for instance, together. We did wonderful things in the summers. And they only went to camp once or twice because so we could be together. But as I said, women did not work in those days. But of course, at Bryn Mawr, I had a friend who was a woman but one of the women had children, but no, most of them didn't. There were some married women, but they did not have children. So working and children was not typical.
And where was your mother?
My mother stayed in New York and had a very active practice. And luckily, she got to know her grandchildren, 3 grandchildren. When my mother it's a sort of a sad story. She fell on her head in my house when she was practicing medicine when she was 86. She was still getting new babies, so at 86. And she fell on her head, and she lost all function but got 90% back at rehab. And insisted on going back to her apartment. She wanted to continue practicing medicine. But in the meantime, my sister and I thought she should stop. So she retired and stayed in New York City in her apartment where she knew people, she was comfortable. And so it worked out fine, except that I had to go there all the time, especially when she got older. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But she was very beloved by everybody.
Can you tell us more about your husband, where his family was from?
Well, the interesting part about my husband was when I first met him, as I said, we went square dancing, and then we met through common things afterwards. And we were walking down Madison Avenue, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm from Belgium." I said, "Oh, I'm from Yugoslavia." And he said, "When did you come?" And I said, "I came in 1942. He said, "I came in 1941. And he said, "I came on the Guinée." The ship was called Guinée. And I said, "What?" When we came on the Guinée, because that was the ship we came on, mm-hmm. It was in all the newspapers. I forgot to tell you that. When we came, the the media was there to take pictures and to write articles, because our ship, the war had started here. Our ship was the last ship they allowed to come in with refugees. The last ship. So I have the articles. I have 2 of them. I couldn't track down others. And people around the country saw Dr. Erna Koenig with his Dr. Erna Koenig. There's probably nobody else named like that. And so they started calling. They heard that we were here. So people got in touch with her because they read the papers. And it was syndicated around the country. But anyway, so my husband, my boyfriend, he wasn't even a boyfriend at that point. We talked, and we had so much in common. His mother was a physician. My mother was a physician. His father was an engineer. My father had been, before he died, an engineer. They came out of Belgium as the Germans were strafing the lines of cars coming out of Belgium. We did not escape like that. I mean, they escaped, actually, and went to Portugal and stayed there for about a year, I think. But anyway, we had so much in common, so of course we started dating, and that was that. Then we got married after my freshman years. But I knew him for 5 years by the time I got married. 4 years, yeah. So he had a very, very similar background.
It's a good start.
And he was an engineer, and I think he was the youngest general manager at GE. Mm-hmm. But he did pretty well. But we got divorced. You change. Life changes you.
Okay. Is he still living?
He died of COVID in 2000.
And where are your children living? And their names and where they're living?
Jude she moved here when her daughter was in 3rd grade, lived here 17 years, and right before COVID, they sold their house and moved to Germantown, New York, on the Hudson. Dina, and she, as she said, she's a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And Dina and the twins, she lives outside of Boston, Wayland, and she's a psychologist. She's a PhD psychologist and has an active practice. David, her twin brother, lives in outside of Portland, Maine, in Cape Elizabeth, and he's a psychiatrist. And Jean lives in Silicon Valley area, in the Bay Area near San Francisco, and she has twins also, 2 girls who started college now. So they all have kids, they're all married, and we're very close. My sister and I, I don't remember when it was, when she was, maybe it was 12 or 13 years ago, took our families to Croatia. And my mother, my sister, and I, the 3 of us, came to the United States. And my sister and I took just our families, our kids and grandkids. Mm-hmm. We were 24. God went back. And so I organized a trip with my daughter, and we had an amazing time. We saw my house. My grandparents' house had this wall, whitewashed wall, on their store. That the house that the store was in had many apartments. My mother's office was in that one of the apartments, and so on and so forth. On the wall said Garderobe König, which means König store. König was the name of the store of my father. That was my mother's name. And that was still, you could see a little bit on the wall. So that was very interesting when we were there. Everybody kicked out of that one.
Yeah. Can you tell me about your professional career, please?
Yeah, I was got my PhD in biochemistry and got a postdoc at University of Pennsylvania and worked there for 2 years as a postdoc. Then I became a research associate, and then I got a job on the faculty, and I was a professor at the Medical College of Pennsylvania teaching biochemistry. My research was always in lipids. At first, it was on tetrahymena, which is a protozoan. And then when I went to Penn, it was on herpes virus, which has a lipid membrane. And when I went to MCP, which is Medical College of Pennsylvania, it was on atherosclerosis, but my part was on cholesterol metabolism. And when I was there about 8 years, I was there about 6 years, they asked me to be Dean of Women. I knew nothing about women. I mean, because I had 4 kids, I went to school, I worked full time. My mother's a doctor. I didn't realize women had problems or anything. So why do you need to do, it was a women's college. Originally, they have a terrific archives for women. And they said, because you did it. I said, what do you mean? I don't know much about it. You worked, you did what women should do or want to do or whatever. So I became Dean of Women, including doing the biochemical research for a while. And I learned a lot about women, and I didn't know what kind of trouble I was facing all the time. I didn't realize that it was difficult for women, because it was difficult for me, but I thought it was the way it is. So then when I became Dean of Women and did the research, people started asking me to do some consulting on cell growth, because biotech was starting. How do you increase the size of your cultures to manufacture things? So then I started doing consulting, and I was asked to form a consulting group. So my partner and I formed a group, and I did a lot of consulting for NASA, a lot, because he worked for GE in the space program. So he got us jobs, I didn't. I worked for Sharon in Israel once, who was, he was the minister, the Sharon that you know about, but at that time, he was Minister of Industry and Trade. Mm. So he asked to have his technology world assessed to decide where they should put their money, what's commercializable and what's worthwhile to follow. And so I did, of course, the biomedical stuff, biotech and so on, and my partner did all the physical, electronic stuff. So we wrote reports for him, so I spent a lot of time in Israel. I loved Israel. I think I would have been so happy to have gone there.
Me too.
So I did a lot of interesting consulting.
As you were very highly educated, you traveled, you met people from all over the world, and you grew up as a refugee initially. Would you like to comment about what's been going on in Ukraine, in Israel?
Oh my God, my heart goes out to the Ukrainian people. I can't imagine how horrible it is. I think I feel what everybody else does who has any kind of a heart. And I think what's happening in Israel right now is very, very sad. My heart breaks for the Palestinians and what they're doing to the Palestinians. I'm not that knowledgeable. I'm political here, very political, but I just don't know what can be done. Israel has to continue. It has to exist. And I see no other way besides having a two-state
Two-state solution.
two-state solution. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine the nice people I know in Israel doing all this killing. It's got to be another way. Well, I blame a lot of what we're hearing and how people here feel on the news media. I just don't think that they're fair in the way they report things. First of all, Israel's taken over, and we don't hear much about the Ukraine anymore. It's all Israel, and it's all what Israel's doing. They don't talk about the fact that the Palestinians were bombing now for 70 years, that they were living under a regime, they're living next to regimes whose mission is to get rid of Israel. If somebody was trying to get rid of my family, I would do anything to stop it. So that's one side of what I feel. The other side is, how can you hurt people who are innocent like that, Palestinians? How can they do that to the people? I don't know what the answers are. I don't know. My heart breaks.
Do you think that you're particularly sensitive because of the way you were a victim of the war?
Well, that's another story. I don't think I'm very sensitive because of that. In fact, I think I'm the opposite, because I think I just never thought about it. I used denial. I didn't worry about it. I'm sure I've got PTSD in some area of my life, but certainly not sensitivity, because I can compare myself to my sister, who is very sensitive. She could never watch Holocaust movies. I did. I mean, I can shut things out. And that's because of the war. I was much older, and I was able to develop defenses. She wasn't.
You mentioned that you're active politically. Do you want to explain that?
Oh, I'm an elected committee person here. I represent our area in the county. I'm on the executive board of the county, which is elected by the executive board here, by the committee people here. And so I'm very active. Our mission basically is to get people out to vote. Get Democrats out to vote. So I'm a staunch Democrat. I can't say I'm all the way left-wing Democrat, but I'm definitely liberal, progressive in every way that I know of. And I never even read the papers until much, much later in life, because I was too busy. And I knew my husband would tell me if anything was something I should know. And he did. He always talked about the news. So I didn't have time to read the papers. I read scientific stuff all the time that I had to read. And so then I decided I have to do something for the world. And I am interested in politics because of my background. I'm very interested. And now, of course, I'm petrified because I feel I'm living again in the 19th. I didn't live in the 30s. I didn't know anybody in the 30s. But I'm scared for everybody. And I think people are so ignorant. I don't care if I say it. I've done this thing. I don't understand how are they thinking. Just don't get it. Where do they come from? How can they vote for somebody who's a criminal, who's got 19, what does it he have?
90.
90, I'm sorry, I said 19. How can they possibly even think that that would be somebody who they want to be ruled by? I just, it's like I'm in Alice in Wonderland kind of place.
Right. Is there anything that you would still like to add to your story that I have not asked you about, or something you need to go back to?
Oh boy, I'm sure there's a lot. I learned 3 things. One is you have to make yourself happy inside yourself. The second thing is you can't change the outside world, but you can change your attitude. And attitude to me is everything. And I think that's why we survived. And, well, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But the story is, I've skipped a lot, but I think you got the overall picture.
Anything you wanted to go back to before we close? Anything you said you skipped a lot, and
Yeah.
is there something in particular that you want to talk about?
Not that I can think of.
What about the reparations?
Oh. Yeah. When we came here, my mother belonged to a society, and I did too as a child. We had children of Jewish Yugoslav Jews in New York City. And there were a lot. We had Hanukkah parties every year, and that was my social life. And so she really belonged to that. And one of the men who was a very good friend of hers, an attorney, started trying to get reparations, get money for the things we left behind, the buildings and property, and for our, well, we tried to get it from Germany, but we couldn't do that. But we got some reparations from Yugoslavia because Yugoslavia made an agreement with the United States to give reparations for the losses during the Second World War. So we were part of that large group of people who got some reparations. And I think it was too little, too late. You can't bring people back, but there was a lot of suffering, a lot of suffering. So that was something that I think people should be aware of, that the United States did organize that at the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being interested.
All right.
And we rolling. I need to. And I'm rolling, Eva, whenever you're ready.
Ava, you said you wanted to add some things to the video?
I was just thinking, you made me think about things. You asked me what the effects were and what's left now. And I was thinking of that the other day, and I thought there's a lot of very, very good effects, in the sense that I grew up very young. I appreciate things a lot more than most people. Anything that happens that's good, I see it as good, and I'm very grateful for being alive and for having what I have, which is just amazing. I think gave me a world view, a different perspective of the world, of the capability, not only the goodness of people, but what extreme badness there can be, also horror and so on. But what happens is one matures very, very quickly when these kinds of things happen. So I think that was something that helped me. And in terms of what I think was counterproductive, although it had its good parts, is that, as I said before, I use denial, and I just bury things, which also is good because I don't dwell on bad things that are happening. And I can, my what do you call it? My resilience is very, very high. What was bad, though, is that I always, and I think I still do in a certain way, I always felt completely alienated. I was in this country since I was 9, and I never felt part of anything here. There's always, because I was maybe at a critical age, I was taken away from feeling as part of things. In a certain way, I do feel. And I do now that I'm older, yes, but I've always felt like I was outside of the bubble, that I had nothing to do with it. I never talked about being Jewish. I don't know if I was afraid. Definitely not ashamed. I'm very proud of it. But I I never talked. When I moved here, I made sure that people knew that I was Jewish. I would say something tangentially, like, "Oh, I have to pick up my kids at Hebrew school," or "Oh my God, tomorrow's Yom Kippur." I'd say something so that they wouldn't say something that might insult me or themselves. The other thing is that it makes me see this era very differently. I'm very suspicious of what's happening now, because I see similarities between what people can do and what can become that other people have not seen, that people just aren't thinking about, talking about it, which I don't understand. In terms of, well, just a little story that I thought was sort of funny is when we were in Germany, we were told not to talk to anybody. So, and that was the reason, was because we were supposed to not say we were Jewish. Because in Frankfurt, they told my mother to not mention it. And so she didn't want us to say it to anybody. I mean, of course, she was afraid of it. People knew about the concentration camps. People think that they didn't. And so we went to visit my aunt, and my sister got lost. She didn't follow us into a store or something, and she knew she couldn't talk to anybody. So she couldn't go to the police or do anything like that. And my mother was scared out of her wits. She didn't want to go to the police with something like that. And in the end, my sister found her way back to the hotel, which was sort of amazing. She was 4, and she did do that. So I thought that was a really funny story. But otherwise, there is, I mean, I really appreciate that you're doing this. I think this project is just amazing. And I think especially today, it's so important for people to realize that there was such a thing as concentration camps. That camp was right near the city I lived in. My whole family was taken, one after another, and murdered in those concentration camps. We lost them. So how people could even mention that wasn't real, and kids should learn about it, not only because of the past. I think if they don't understand this past, what happened, they won't be vigilant about the future. And so I think that's very, very important that they really know about what happened. And people forget easily. And if it wasn't in your particular era, like the First World War was not in my era, so I didn't think much about it. So I think it's very important, and I'm hearing now that a lot of the schools have stopped teaching the Holocaust. And I think it's important as a model, if nothing else, for any kinds of people, that these things can happen. And it happens to, in Africa, it happens in other countries. And if they're not people aren't educated, you lose a lot of a lot of things that you could teach people which would help them in our society. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and Roland, everybody's ready.
Ava, would you like to introduce your daughter to us?
Yes, of course. This is my daughter, Jude Ray. She's my oldest daughter, who was always responsible for the other 3. The other 3 that were almost her age.
Like her mom.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to have you here.
Would you like to say something for your mom?
So, I just wanted to say how proud I am of her resilience, her spirit, how much she's passed on of that to not just us, but her grandchildren, what it means to be a survivor is such a profound kind of, her life was built on loss. And so for the fact that she doesn't see it as built on loss is a really profound lesson to everybody who's followed in her footsteps. And her activism, her energy, her belief in human capacity for good, that you have the positivity that's what you hold on to. That's what remains. I mean, there are just a lot of things we grew up with, that attitudes we grew up with, that I think very much influenced all of our career choices and our ethics and our stance in the world and our belief in fighting fighting back and not giving in when things are bad, and never letting yourself kind of be passive. Or we don't get a lot of rest in our family, but we try to make the best out of every moment. And, you know, we've all experienced bad things, but we somehow find ourselves recovering and trying to pass those lessons on to our kids. So the fact that our father really had a very parallel story meant that we we got it on both sides. So on the one hand, we are a trauma-informed family, trauma-formed and trauma-informed. And the four of us, my siblings, I mean, we all ended up going into helping professions in one way or another. We have a psychiatrist who became a, you know, organizational development specialist to look at systems and how you make systems more functional. We have and a psychologist who is, and they're both into family systems. So it's about how do you not pass on trauma. All of us studied that. I'm a professional storyteller and filmmaker who works specifically on human rights issues, and has for a long time, and then went into the wellness space and, you know, started wanting to do much more direct work with healing, and listening to people who are marginalized, like my parents were, who go through trauma, who need to process that. So my youngest sister became a lawyer, which is all about how do you prevent, you know, bad things from happening as well, and defend the people who need defending. And so I think all of us took away, we were surrounded by these stories. My parents, we were very lucky. They didn't not talk about them. They did pass things on. They weren't, you wanted us to be extremely aware of this history, and you passed it on in a very strong way. And I feel like that is part of the legacy that we inherited, along with a lot of awareness of people's grief, of violence in the world, of things that actually may not have been that great to grow up knowing about. I do remember being like 9 years old and reading her diary from the exact same age. So she wrote about her experiences, and it's the first time that I really, really understood, because I identified precisely with the age she was. And that's when you gave it to me to read. I ended up taking it to school, and so I was in 4th grade or 3rd grade, and I took it and read it to my class. We had to bring something from home to read to the class. And I brought it. And people, I remember the kids, they're like just sitting there with their jaws dropped open, like none of them, this is the main line. This is like the most established part of Philadelphia that we live in. This was a very anti-Semitic area at the time. I was not allowed to go to parties at the country clubs that my friends' families belonged to, because they were anti-Jewish. You couldn't go. So there were things we were already excluded from. So to understand that, to be in Hebrew school, to read this to the class, to share this history then as a 9-year-old, both helped me become someone who tries to have a voice in the midst of pretty negative shit. And at the same time, was a very difficult thing to process for myself, and it made us feel alienated as well. And so I grew up with that kind of dual awareness. So this stuff is passed on in positive ways, and also ways that continue to, make me very aware of the need to do deep, deep healing work in society and have dialogue with people who are very, very different and who don't understand you, and who don't even know why they should, who can't understand why you are different as opposed to the opposite way around.
Touche.
So I think those are some of the things that we grew up with, that we got out of being the children of Holocaust survivors and first generation Americans. I think we also identify strongly with the immigrant experience. We don't think of it as being very far away. It's not. And we cherish the opportunities that my parents made for themselves. And we also know that they, what their struggles to get to the point that they did, the amount of work, the amount of denial, the amount of putting things behind you, the amount of building and creativity, creative energy that takes. So I think none of us we don't expect things to come easy, but we work really hard, but we also understand that there are levels of privilege. We understand a lot about the world that we want and need to, keep working on, and you've been a great model for that. And that experience, I think also the last thing I want to say is that going to Croatia together as a family was a very profound experience. Going to the heart of where my mother and my aunt and my grandmother lived, and seeing their house and their property, which was substantial. They were completely established people. They had a totally bourgeois experience in their lives. Our family tree goes back 400 years in Zagreb. And so these weren't people who were like, suddenly they got there and then suddenly they weren't there anymore. It wasn't like that. It was this was a life that was so built from such deep, deep roots, and yet they were uprooted utterly. And that uprooting, it was amazing to see it, to see the physical signs of it. The store that they have, it was like a store, going to Fifth Avenue in New York and seeing, Hermes or something. I mean, the sign of our name, their old name, is painted in layers, incredible layers under. You could see the layers of the family name on that building still. Her house was taken over ultimately by the communist government, so there were multiple takeovers, and we met the person who now lives there, and it's just her house.
They made it into apartments.
They turned it into apartments. People live there.
And it was not big.
They are not aware of the history. They were grateful because they got a free house from the communist government, which they thought was better than today's government. So things like that were just amazing to see. But I think that my interest in part is in the idea that you can lose everything, your culture, your family, your name, your religion, your freedom, and be uprooted, your stuff, your material world, completely lose it all, and then how is that healed? It's extraordinary, and the resilience is, it is attitude, it's a lot of things that go into that level of being functional after that, a lot. And it's fascinating to me to kind of understand the kind of supports that it took that not everybody has, and so I'm very aware of that. I mean, my grandmother, there was a Yugoslav, I think you talked about the Yugoslav American.
Yeah.
That was a whole community of people who were there to support them when they got here. So it wasn't like individuals are just pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. There was still, through the world, there were these networks that we still need to have and need to keep building, that I think also affected your life positively and helped you make transitions that were very, very difficult. Painfully difficult. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
This is my mother, Erna Koenig, and my father, Franjo Koenig, Erna Kohn at that time. And they met when they were, I think she was 16 when she met him, but she went on to medical school and became a doctor, and they finally got married after probably a romance, as you see in this picture, when she was 30. And so that was in, she was born in 1902, so that was 1932. And that's it.
Sorry. Okay, and I'm rolling.
So in 1932, my mother and my father married. And this was a few years after he had tried to come to the United States and tried to get a visa. But this was also after she finished medical school. So that's what this is a wedding certificate.
Okay, I'm rolling.
I wanted to show this picture because this exemplifies how happy and how big how a family who lives together and has many, many relatives. This is my mother and her mother and a friend. This is to just show you that, or tell you that my mother had a very strong family and a very secure first 30 years of her life. And maybe that's what gave her the strength to face what the rest of the story is in my life.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
And this is a picture of my mother, my new baby sister, and me on the left. And as I said, when she came home with that baby, the baby couldn't play with me. I was very disappointed, but she became my closest friend and was that the rest of our lives, especially since we shared the very, very sad experiences that we went through.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
Oh, this is my grandmother, my mother's mother, Selena. She was the most wonderful person. I adored her. She taught me how to sew. We spent holidays at her house. And she had 6 children. And I'll show you the pictures of them. Of some, so you don't see the things on the bottom.
Well, it's.
Interesting.
And I'm rolling.
All right, this is Blanca. Blanca was the second from the oldest. The oldest child, Olga, died, I think maybe in her 20s. So I don't have pictures of her, but this is Blanca. She lived in Belgrade. Everybody else lived in Zagreb. And actually on the bottom right is my father's one and only sister.
Okay, and who is this?
This is Sanda. This is the, she was married to Reno, and Sanda and Reno's apartment is where we went when the soldiers took over our house, and we stayed there for quite a while until we were able to leave Zagreb. I can, if you can do that.
We're rolling.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eve. He's rolling. Go ahead.
This is Alice, my aunt, the only sister of my father's. They decided very early to come to the United States to escape Hitler. And they were very lucky because they came here before the United States went into the war, and were able to establish themselves in California, where my uncle was a obstetrician gynecologist.
I'm rolling.
This is my father, Franjo. I remember him so well. I remember him in very specific times when he sat me on his lap at the piano and taught me. He really got me to have perfect pitch. And he was very kind. He was gentle and very, very kind. And the nice part is that people tell me I look like him. When I was young, people used to tell me that. And somehow I went through life thinking that he kind of watching me when I was a little girl, that is. And it gave me a lot of comfort because I was very close to him and I missed him. And he died the day after my birthday, my 6th birthday. is my father again, and this is the way I picture him. The other one was just a portrait, but here he's just exhibiting he was athletic. He belonged to a group where they did sculling, they call it sculling here, and he was a member of something called Schlalaffen, where they did various kinds of sports. And in addition to that, we went skiing every winter from the time I was 2 till I was 5, and then he passed away, unfortunately. But I always picture him in this picture, and to me, he looks really, really very handsome.
Was his proactivity proactive? And got the visa and was thinking...
I don't know how to be, I don't know how to be proactive. Maybe that's why I don't do it.
Okay, and hold on a second. And I'm rolling.
Oh, I love this picture because it is the house. It had a canopy, and it was, for me, it was luxury. It was surrounded by really luxurious houses with doormen. Ours wasn't. But that's Maya, my sister, and me when we moved into 86th Street in New York between Madison and Park. And my mother's office was here on the first floor. And we kind of shared the office rooms with her. We just were very used to people coming in and out, and there was a door separating us, and we were not allowed to walk into the other area. But I was going to PS 6 at the time, and Maya was, I think, in first grade there. No, she was in third grade, and I was in sixth grade. That's it. I think the top one tells more about how close we were. 14 here.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
This is me and my sister Maya, and you can see in her posture, really, she always adulated me, which put me on the spot actually, because I had to be perfect, particularly for her. But I think I was maybe 14 here, and she must have been 11 or something like that. So it was a good time for me at that age. I was popular in school, and I took care of Maya as usual.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
After we were here 5 years, my mother applied for citizenship, and she also applied for us individually, so Maya and I could each get our own citizenship and not just with hers. And when we got our citizenship, we had to go down to, I don't know what it was, some kind of a city hall type of place. And we had to swear allegiance to the United States. And I was so proud and excited because we were citizens of the United States, which to me was like the Garden of Eden.
I'm rolling.
I look at this picture of my mother. This is when we were here 5 years, and my mother applied for citizenship. She was naturalized at the same time I was. But as I look at the picture, it's shocking to me that when everything happened with my father dying, the war starting, our trip to the United States, her establishing herself as a doctor, she was only 38 or 39 years old, and that's shocking to me because I always, in my head, thought she was much older. But she was young when she had all this to do, and she was amazing. Thank you very much.
So were you.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
When we came to the United States on the ship and we saw the Statue of Liberty, we got into shore and we looked down, and everybody was standing at the railing, and down below were photographers taking pictures of everything. What they really caught was Maya and me, because we had, I guess we were young and cute, but we had these babushkas, these scarves that my grandmother, who had been to the United States, had bought in the United States, and they were a replica of the American flag. So we were wearing these on our heads, and probably my mother had us wear them, but it was cold also, so we wore them just to cover our ears. and they took pictures of us. And those pictures were in the newspapers. They were syndicated across the United States because our ship was the last ship allowed to come to the United States with immigrants at that time, because the United States was at war. So they were not accepting people from Europe, and they were not accepting Jews, that's for sure.
Didn't they dress you up? Can you talk about that? Did they put you?
That's a different story.
And I'm rolling.
Okay, this is, as it said, this is the last arrival of what may be the last refugee ship, is what the headline says above it. I'm not sure who the people are on my left, but that's my sister and me again with those kerchiefs on our heads. And people called my mother because they saw the articles in their newspapers all over the country and realized that Dr. Erna Koenig came to the United States because here we were. And underneath it says that Dr. Erna Koenig, with her children Maya and Eva, came to the United States on this last ship.
Why was it the last ship?
Because we were at war.
Quotas?
No,
Quotas?
that's not why. 'Cause
Why? Oh, because
She
we
said
had
it during the,
it wasn't because of the quotas.
no.
Hold on a second. And I'm rolling.
Well, this is just a picture of people walking around the streets in Zagreb, and everybody is wearing a Jewish star. It's a yellow piece of fabric with the letters Z with a line through it, which stood for Zhidov.
And I'm rolling.
This is a picture of the whole medical team at Mount Sinai Hospital. My mother worked there once a week. I think it was once or twice a week. And it gave her the right to treat her patients who were there and for her patients to get a bed in the hospital. And every doctor in those days had to volunteer in hospitals in order to have the rights to use that hospital. And people absolutely loved her. She was always invited to parties at their houses. And once a year, she made a party at her house for the doctors. And I went to New York and made the party for her every single year because she liked to entertain them.
A lot of her patients were the Yugoslav.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a sec?
Well, if I get her picture again, someplace. Do you look about 10 there?
And I'm rolling.
This is the only sister of this is my mother's only sister who survived. Her name was Ivka Goldstein, and that's her husband. We called him Sami Goldstein, and her son, Boris. And Boris was about 4 years or 5 years younger than me. And the interesting part is that they could not get into the United States, so my mother arranged for them to go to Venezuela, to Caracas. But later on, Boris, his parents gave him up for a whole 4 years, or 8 years, probably, or 7 years. He lived with my mother, and he lived with us, so that he could go to school in America because the Caracas schools were so bad. So he went to a prep school, and then he went to Cornell, where I had gone, and had a great education, and then moved back to Caracas, married an American girl, and moved back there.
So your family was split up.
So, yeah.
And I'm rolling.
So that's this is a diary I kept. I started it in Croatia, and every day or every few days I would write in it, and I called it Dear Diary. And then I told whatever happened to me at the time. And I came into the United States in 1942, January. And here's a diary of what I did on top in the pen. And then on the bottom, there's a date. And this is written in 43, which means I was here like almost 2 years. And it says, "Dear Diary," because I still wrote in Croatian until, really until 42, I think it was. And I wrote, "Dear Diary, I'm going to start writing to you in English now because I can do that." And then it starts saying, in school, it was very nice. The teachers was very nice to me and with other children and so on and so forth in English. And the amazing part to me is the English is perfect. There's not a misspelled word. And that just shows you how quickly a child develops a language, because I don't think I was particularly more skilled than most kids, but it is very well written in English. I got a teacher who was okay, who was good to me, etc., etc. Mom, that's not my mother. One of those pictures is somebody else. I can't see.
It is.
Who's on the right bottom? Right side, the bottom.
Nanny. It's all Nanny.
Even,
Every single one.
oh, everyone. All right, fine. Okay.
I'm rolling.
This is various pictures of my mother throughout her life. The bottom one with my mother and my father was as they were courting. And no, this is, it is when they were already married, because he had a mustache, and I remember him with a mustache. I hated the mustache, and then he shaved it off before he died. So I was happy about that. And then there's another interesting picture here of my mother in her orange, the picture of my mother above where she's wearing an orange. She looks absolutely emaciated. And I remember that picture was taken for her visa, or around that time when we were in Portugal or Spain, where she was stressed and she looked really, really bad at that time. And it's very visible in this picture. Then she's then she gets into the United States, and the one on the right, middle and the right, she's happy. We're at Schroon Lake and having a vacation, and same in the bottom. Then she goes and takes her medical exams, studies for the medical boards, like all the medical students here. So she had practiced for 12 years, had forgotten, of course, biochemistry and physics and whatever you had to take. She had to relearn it to take her medical boards. And she studied and studied and studied. And in the right corner, you see she's got her medical license and is looking at an X-ray, which they did in those days themselves. On the left side, she's very, very settled and very happy in her consultation room where she's waiting for a patient.
She did all that in
I'm rolling.
The United States made a agreement with Croatia after the war in the 50s, when they agreed that Croatia will pay all the Jews that were persecuted or killed and murdered in the concentration camps. The families will get reparations for those things that happened during the war. And in the 50s, my mother had a lot of colleagues who were Croatian Jews. She belonged to a society like that. And one of her colleagues was an attorney who took on the cases for many, many of the people. And this is a document where, in the end, we as a family got some money, some for Maya, some for me, and some from my mother, from the, this is yes, this is when Yugoslavia was already, when Yugoslavia was already broken up into Croatia and so on. So the Croatian government gave this to us.
It wasn't Croatia until the 90s.
I know, I mixed all that up. I just couldn't remember. Tito was still in power.
Yes. This is
I know,
Tito,
this was so
when it
stupid.
was still a communist party.
I know, it was, remember.
And I'm rolling.
This is a document which shows that during the 50s, the United States made an agreement with Croatia when Tito was still in power, and it was a communist country, to give reparations or payments to families or individuals who had been affected by the murder of many Jews, of many people even in Croatia, and where the communist country took over the properties of all the people which had been private properties, and they confiscated them and nationalized them. So we as a family got some money from this because of this agreement.
And I'm rolling.
This is a picture of Maya, my sister, on the right, and me on the left. And the reason I love this picture is because it really expresses how we feel with each other when we're in each other's company and for each other. And she's my best friend, and I think I still have to take care of her.
Okay, and cut. I'm rolling.
Okay, this is Maya, my sister on the right, with her husband on my left. I'm sorry, Maya's on the left, and her husband is on my right. And I am holding my two little twin babies. They're, of course, less than a year old. It looks like they were maybe a few months old. And on the lap of Maya's husband is my oldest child, Jude, who is less than 2 years older than the twins. So she was about 2 years old here in this picture. She had a vocabulary, I wrote her vocabulary down when she was 2 years old, and she's had like 200 to 300 words. She talked fluently. I think I did that when she was 1 year old, 1 year old. I loved my babies.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
Hi, this is a picture of my Dan and a party that my family gave to me. I think it was for my 75th birthday. And my daughter, Jean, she is the youngest. The baby is on the right. And Dina in the middle is holding a jacket, which I will talk about, but she had framed for me for my birthday. And we were having a wonderful time.
We all had it framed for you. That's all we have right now.
And I'm rolling.
Well, I'm very lucky now. I have 6 grandchildren. My 4 children each had children. And on the left is Corey, who is pretty much the same age as Zazie on the right. And their cousin, Julian, is in the middle. And Julian is David and Margaret's son. Corey is Dina's son, Dina's daughter, and Zazie is Jude and Paul's daughter.
Can you tie that to how, like, having grandchildren, how does that
Oh, yeah.
Half of your story.
Yeah, it's a stupid. I didn't know how to do it. I've lost my. Can you do that over?
You don't need to do it over. Just keep going. He doesn't need to do it over.
Oh, the happiest time in my life when I look back, having a fabulous career, living in a great place, but the happiest, the most important time in my life is when I was with my children. And that has now transformed to now when I'm with my grandchildren also gives me tremendous, tremendous joy. And we're very, very close between the kids and the grandkids. And the 6 grandkids give me a lot of pleasure.
But does that tie? Do you ever think about how that ties to the fact that you had you had cousins who couldn't have kids or anything
No.
like that? No, you don't think about it. Wow.
You do. It doesn't matter who it is, it's kids.
No?
We've been very, very lucky. I was able to rent a house every summer. Our whole family gets together. And this is just 2 of my grandchildren, who are Zazie and Corey, who, as you can tell, really, really love each other, as all my kids do to each other. I am really, really lucky to have this opportunity to be close and see my grandchildren and have these reunions. And now I see, now that they're much, much older, that they're very, very close to each other. And that was probably one of the most important things to me, not having had a family, not having had a chance to have grandparents. I didn't know about how grandparents should be or would be, so I was just me. And I did what I felt like doing, and apparently I did the right things. It worked. Everybody is very close and loves each other a lot. So I'm very, very lucky. Not that they don't have problems sometimes, like families do, but I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we were in the Holocaust. We lost everything. And my husband and I that was very important to us.
And I'm rolling?
This outfit, this dress, and the vest that goes with it and goes over the shoulders is what the peasants wore in Zagreb. And this is how I remember that we lived near the edge of the town, and there were a lot of peasants who farmed there, and they all dressed like this. They didn't wear the Western clothes that we wore. And so I have this dress because when we were in New York City, Mayor LaGuardia, sometimes during the war, wanted to emphasize that New York is taking in a lot of foreign people, and it's a refuge, and it was a PR piece. So he asked several children to come to his office dressed in their original clothes, in their costumes from their countries. So my mother went and rented this, because of course I didn't dress like this. I dressed it like you and everybody else dresses, in Western clothes. But I wore this as a 10-year-old at Mayor LaGuardia's office because he used us to prove a point and do PR. And then we decided to buy the costume. And the vest, which is sitting on the floor, is in a frame because it's really beautiful. It's leather and fur, and sheep hair. And my kids had that taken off and framed because it is a beautiful piece of clothing. And I just love that. It just brings back a lot of memories of all these wonderful peasants that we knew down in Zagreb as I was growing up.
What do you mean peasants, Mom? Why would you use that word?
That's what they're called. What would you call them?
So were they farm kids? What do you mean peasants?
I don't know what you mean. They were peasants. They were people who dressed like that.